Imagine the following. It's easy if you try. A control room, once humming with the voices of engineers guiding a satellite launch, now stands half empty. A scientist, once mapping the lunar surface, stares at an email. Her project is on indefinite hold. And a startup CEO, once confident in securing a commercial space license, now faces endless regulatory delays. Across the space sector, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to NASA and to private aerospace firms, the Department of Government Efficiency's layoffs have triggered a ripple effect of disruption. The cuts were meant to bring efficiency, but instead they have introduced chaos. Momentarily, and regulatory bottlenecks, mission delays, and uncertainty now plague an industry that once symbolized technological progress and national ambition. The consequences stretch beyond jobs. They threaten America's leadership in space, its economic growth, and its national security. Before we break down the impact of these layoffs, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends, because space is changing fast, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The most immediate and devastating consequence of the DOGE layoffs has been the weakening of regulatory agencies responsible for managing space activities. NOAA, once a linchpin in satellite traffic coordination, has suffered significant workforce reductions, and the Office of Space Commerce, which oversees commercial satellite licensing, is now operating with skeletal staff. And what was once a straightforward approval process for satellite operators has transformed into a bureaucratic nightmare of delays and uncertainty. The Traffic Coordination System for Space, TRAX, designed to prevent orbital collisions, now teeters on the brink of collapse. With more satellites being launched than ever before, the absence of an efficient oversight body introduces a dangerous reality: increasing congestion, higher risks of satellite collisions, and an ever growing cloud of hazardous space debris. The implications reach far beyond commercial interests. GPS, navigation, and weather forecasting, along with global communications, depend on a well regulated and safe orbital environment. Every delay in satellite licensing means stalled projects, lost investments, and disrupted services. And companies that once relied on a smooth regulatory framework now face uncertainty, forcing them to reconsider their long term strategies. Some may look to other countries with more predictable oversight. And if these trends continue, then the US may no longer be the preferred launch destination for the world's greatest space ventures. Now, the immediate effects of these DOGE layoffs are already being felt, but as the cuts ripple outward, they are beginning to erode something even more fundamental: the nation's ability to explore, innovate, and lead. Let us consider, for example, the case of NASA. The layoffs have not spared NASA, the backbone of American space exploration. A 10% reduction in its workforce may seem like a bureaucratic trimming, but in an industry where every project relies on highly specialized talent, such cuts can derail entire missions. The Artemis program, which aims to return humans to the moon and establish a permanent presence there, now faces significant delays, and engineers, researchers, and mission planners, many with decades of experience, are now gone, and the intricate web of planning that ensures rockets launch on time, land safely, and push beyond the boundaries of exploration has been frayed. The layoffs mean fewer hands to solve complex technical challenges, fewer minds to drive innovation, and fewer resources to meet international commitments. The timeline for a lunar base, already ambitious, now teeters on the edge of uncertainty. And beyond Artemis, the impact spreads to Mars exploration, Earth observation, and next generation propulsion systems. Research programs aimed at studying climate change from orbit, developing sustainable space habitats, and designing the spacecraft that will one day take humans to Mars are now in jeopardy. And these are not mere projects, they are stepping stones to the future of space exploration. NASA's workforce reduction also sends a troubling message to international partners. The agency has long been the anchor of global space cooperation, working with the European Space Agency, Japan's JAXA, and others to pursue deep space missions. But with resources dwindling and commitments becoming harder to keep, if NASA can no longer guarantee stability, then allied nations may turn elsewhere, reshaping the balance of space leadership. And the prime challengers are China and Russia. Both have ramped up their lunar programs, investing in sustained space infrastructure and long term exploration strategies. If the US stumbles, then others will seize the opportunity to fill the void. Space has always been a domain of prestige, power, and influence. But these layoffs risk ceding that influence to nations that are far more strategically committed to the final frontier. NASA and NOAA are not the only ones facing upheaval. The DOGE layoffs have sent shockwaves through the private aerospace industry, where government contracts and regulatory stability are the foundation of success. Blue Origin, once poised to compete with SpaceX for dominance in launch services, has announced a 10% workforce reduction. That means 1,400 engineers, technicians, and specialists are now out of work. And while the company claims that this is part of a restructuring effort, the timing is no coincidence. And these layoffs signal deeper financial strain across the industry. Private companies depend on government contracts, regulatory approvals, and infrastructure investments to operate efficiently. When NOAA slows down commercial satellite licensing, startups that rely on quick approvals for deployment suddenly find themselves in limbo, and delays in regulatory processes disrupt timelines, making it harder for companies to secure investors or fulfill contracts. The ripple effect is already evident. Space startups, many of which were banking on government partnerships, now face an uncertain future, and some may not survive. Others may look abroad, seeking opportunities in countries with more predictable policies and fewer bureaucratic obstacles. The risk isn't just economic, it is strategic. If American aerospace talent and technology start flowing elsewhere, then the long term consequences could be severe. The space economy thrives on momentum. Investors want stability, and customers, whether commercial satellite operators or international space agencies, want reliability. But with government oversight faltering and job losses mounting, confidence in the U.S. space industry is wavering. And if these layoffs continue to choke innovation, then the nation's leadership in the commercial space race may not be as secure as many once assumed. But commercial uncertainties are not the biggest bugaboo. Because space is not just an industry, it is a battlefield of influence, intelligence, and defense. Every satellite launched serves a purpose, whether for communications, navigation, or surveillance. And with the DOGE layoffs hollowing out key agencies, national security is now at risk. Reduced staffing at NASA and NOAA weakens the very infrastructure that supports military operations. Satellite networks provide real time intelligence, missile defense coordination, and encrypted communications for defense agencies. And when regulatory agencies falter, it is not only commercial space ventures that suffer. America's strategic advantage in space warfare and reconnaissance also takes a hit. Meanwhile, China and Russia are accelerating their efforts. China's Tiangong space station is now fully operational, and its lunar ambitions are expanding. Russia, despite economic sanctions, continues to invest in space based defense systems and satellite technology. If U.S. programs stagnate due to bureaucratic paralysis, then adversaries will seize the moment. The United States has long led the way in space governance, but these layoffs threaten to weaken that grip. Meanwhile, allied nations may also lose confidence in U.S. space leadership. International partnerships, like those between NASA and the European Space Agency or Japan's JAXA, depend on stability. But if the US can no longer guarantee reliability, then strategic alliances could shift, and countries that once worked alongside America might begin forging stronger ties with other rising space powers, diluting US influence in shaping space policy. This is more than an economic challenge. It is a matter of national security. Space is the high ground in modern defense, and losing operational capability means exposing vulnerabilities. If the US cannot maintain its leadership, then others will fill the vacuum, not just in technology and exploration, but in the security architecture that keeps America safe. We should also consider the economic fallout for other areas of the economy because the space industry does not exist in isolation. It is deeply intertwined with local economies, providing thousands of high paying jobs, supporting service industries, and driving technological innovation. The DOGE layoffs are not just numbers on a budget report. They are families losing income, businesses losing customers, and cities losing a vital economic engine. Houston, home to NASA's Johnson Space Center, has long been a hub of aerospace employment. But with engineers, scientists, and technicians being laid off, the effects ripple outward, and now Houston has a problem. Restaurants, retailers, and service providers that relied on these high income professionals now face reduced revenue. Housing markets, once driven by a steady influx of aerospace workers, may also stagnate. And other cities tied to space infrastructure, like Huntsville, Alabama, Cape Canaveral, and Los Angeles, are experiencing the same pressures. And beyond direct employment, the slowdown in space research has broader economic consequences. Space technology fuels advancements in telecommunications, healthcare, energy, and material science. Many innovations, like GPS, satellite imaging, and medical robotics, originated from space programs before finding widespread application. And if research and development slowed down due to budget cuts and workforce reductions, then the downstream impact will be felt across multiple industries. Economic downturns do not happen overnight, but the seeds have already been planted. If space related industries contract, then the skilled workforce they supported may disperse, weakening America's long term position as a leader in high tech innovation. And once talent leaves, it does not always return. This is how decline begins, or in our case, accelerates. Not with a dramatic collapse, but with a slow erosion of capabilities, one layoff at a time, until the day comes when everyone is laid off at one time. Now, that is not to say that the DOGE layoffs are all bad or that there is no sugar to go with this medicine. Supporters of the DOGE layoffs argue that the space sector has become bloated with inefficiencies and redundant programs. They see the reductions not as a crisis, but as a necessary correction, one that will ultimately make space exploration more cost effective and competitive. Private companies like SpaceX have demonstrated that leaner, commercially driven models can achieve results once thought impossible for government agencies. SpaceX has lowered the cost of launch services, pioneered reusable rocket technology, and outpaced traditional bureaucratic institutions in speed and efficiency. Advocates of the layoffs believe that by reducing government involvement, private companies will take on a greater role, driving innovation without excessive taxpayer burden. And there is also the argument that the federal budget must prioritize other pressing national needs. Infrastructure, healthcare, and economic revitalization require funding, and in a time of fiscal tightening, some believe that trimming space related expenditures is a practical move. From this perspective, the government's role should be to set broad objectives and then step aside, allowing market forces to dictate the pace and direction of space development. But efficiency is not always synonymous with progress. It is often the opposite. While commercial space ventures have made great strides, they still rely on government contracts, regulatory stability, and institutional partnerships. Stripping away too much of that foundation too quickly could destabilize the very ecosystem that allows private space companies to thrive. And the challenge, then, is not merely reducing costs, but ensuring that cuts do not undercut the long term viability of American space capabilities. Cost efficiency matters, but reckless cuts to essential programs do more harm than good. And the challenge is not simply reducing government spending, but doing so in a way that preserves America's leadership in space in the present and in the future. And that means finding smarter ways to streamline operations rather than gutting the agencies responsible for regulating and advancing space exploration. Policymakers must look beyond workforce reductions and consider structural reforms, investing in automation and digital transformation within agencies like NOAA and NASA could improve efficiency without sacrificing expertise, and public-private partnerships must be strengthened, ensuring that commercial space companies continue to benefit from a stable regulatory framework while taking on more operational responsibilities. And a more targeted approach would focus on eliminating bureaucratic redundancies without disrupting critical programs. Layoffs should not be an indiscriminate cost cutting measure, but a strategic adjustment to refocus resources on high priority missions. But without a clear strategy, the U.S. risks ceding its space leadership to nations with more coherent long term planning. The path forward requires balance. Cutting waste is necessary, but maintaining national security, scientific progress, and economic stability is equally vital. Because space is not just another industry, it is the foundation of future global power. And the decisions made now will determine whether the U.S. remains at the forefront of exploration or watches as others take the lead. The DOGE layoffs have already reshaped the space sector, disrupting satellite management, delaying exploration programs, and slowing private aerospace activity. And the consequences extend far beyond budgetary concerns. They threaten national security, weaken international partnerships, and jeopardize economic growth in key aerospace hubs. Yet this is not the end of America's space dominance. It is a moment of decision. The US can allow short term cost cutting to dictate the future, or it can recalibrate its approach, ensuring that efficiency reforms do not come at the expense of its global leadership. Striking the right balance means investing in automation, improving regulatory agility, and fostering strong public private partnerships. Space has never been about simple economics, it is about ambition, innovation, and power. If the US fails to recognize the long term risks of these layoffs, then it may soon find itself looking up at a space sector led by others, and the time to act is now. If you found this breakdown insightful, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. The future of space may be uncertain, but we'll be here to analyze every step of the journey. With Elenarda, I'm Gene Botkin. End transmission.